Hey, buenos dias, que onda, que paso, amigos? John's Motor Garage. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're learning how to drift like a freaking maniac on a Harley Davidson. Let's jump into it. Oh, assuming my bike is still in one piece. Shout out again to Cruiser Originals K-Bar coming in for the save. Definitely kept that tank from getting destroyed there.
All right, you guys, real quick, just as a heads up, this is a pretty thorough and in-depth video. So if you're just looking for the down and dirty basics, I'll go over that real quick. Basically, you're gonna be in first gear going about 10, maybe 15 miles per hour. Pull the clutch in, lock up that rear brake, get comfortable doing that first. Then you'll slowly start to do a little 90-degree turn to whichever way you're comfortable, left side or right side. Once you're comfortable doing that, the next key is going to be build up the RPM super high, dump the clutch, and have the bike kind of leaned over on the side so you don't have as much traction on the ground. That way it's easier to brake traction. You don't have all that friction. Build those RPMs up high, dump the clutch, get that back tire swinging around, and just keep it going, modulating the throttle so that you find that sweet spot where you're kind of just keeping the tire moving and swinging in a circle. That's the down and dirty basics of it. Body position, you're going to be kind of up over the handlebars, leaning in the way that you're drifting. As far as where you want to be looking, don't look down right in front of you. It's kind of like when you're turning on a motorcycle, you want to look where you're going to turn. So get in the habit of kind of looking into the circle, whichever way you're going to turn. Once you're a pro, you can look any which way you want, but for us newbies, that's going to be the way you want to start it. Kind of look into the turn the way you're going. Those are the down and dirty basics. Now I'm gonna go super in depth on everything, so stay tuned if you want the full in-depth version.
So I think this goes without saying, but I am not a pro. I'm the ultimate noob novice when it comes down to this. So you may be asking, why the heck am I even doing a video? Well, I've had tons of people asking me, John, you gotta tell us how to do that drift donut thing that you're doing. So I'm gonna do a how-to, basically get up to the point where I'm at now. And because I'm so new, at least I can relate on some of those bases as far as some of the struggles, challenges, and some of the fear and some of the mistakes like the one you just saw that can be had when you're doing this. So I'll put a link below to Dom829. He did a video a while back going over the basics of how to get into drifting. Awesome video. And he taught me a lot of the stuff I'm practicing now. But just from the outset, I will say a few disclaimers. It is dangerous. You do run the risk of hurting yourself. You definitely run the risk of hurting the bike. And so ride at your own risk. Odds are a year or two from now, once I actually know what I'm doing, I'll probably do another video saying, hey, disregard everything you heard in that original video. But for now, this is where I'm at. Now, for the record, there's a kid who I think is like 15 or 16 out on the East Coast who drifts his Sportster and his Dyna. The dude is about half my size. A lot of it does come down to technique. It's not muscling the bike around. It doesn't matter how tall or how big you are. It comes down to technique, practice, and skill. And just like everything else, there's no way of cutting corners. If you want to figure it out, you're gonna have to put in the seat time and practice. All right, let's start out by going over how you can set the bike up in order to minimize the damage, not if, but when the bike goes down. There's two ways the bike can go down. One is a low slide, or low side. That's how you want it to happen. That's basically you're in the drift and you lay it down the way you're drifting. The other is a high side. That's where one way or another the tire locks up or gets traction and it throws you up over the other way. That's what I just did. And that's a more harsh, more aggressive way of going down, and typically it's going to cause a little bit more harm with heavier impact and more damage sustained to the motorcycle. To minimize the damage and at least to protect your tank, I highly recommend get yourself a crash bar, get yourself a lower slider. I go with Cruiser Originals because it gives you the best of both worlds. You have the crash bar up here, you also have the lower slider down here. Also, I highly recommend get yourself some shock sliders. There's tons of options to go with. Based on what Cruiser Originals told me, Ryan Cruzy, if it's too long up here, it can actually act as leverage when you go down and can end up bending the frame. So if you have like a super long slider, it can actually cause more harm than good depending how you go down. So you'll note down here, yeah, I hit my exhaust, but all in all, it protected the important stuff on the bike. The exhaust, one way or another, you're gonna hit your exhaust if you're messing around with this. All right, let's talk about your back tire setup. There's not a specific tire you have to have, but based on what I'm told, you want to avoid doing this with a Shinko 777 because they're super, super sticky. Ideally takeoffs, because you're going to be burning through rubber like nobody's business. This is a Michelin Power Commander, seems to be pretty good. I bumped the pressure up to 40 psi just to make sure it's nice and solid for the drifts. But the dudes who know what they're doing, Dom 829, all those guys, they can run just about any pressure, whether it be the wheelies or the drifting. But for me, I bumped the pressure up specifically for this. Let's talk brake, front brake or rear brake. Do you use it? That depends what school of thought you're from. There's people who do use it. There's people who don't use it. There's people who do both. Seabear Stunts, Dom 829, dudes like that can do it both ways. Some people will say if you use the front brake, it's cheating because it's controlling the drift and it's more just like a burnout. Right now I'm learning it without the rear brake, only because adding in that one more piece to the puzzle seems a little challenging and daunting for me right now. But the way I look at it is, if eventually you learn how to do it with or without a rear brake, that's going to be the best way, because overall you're going to be more well-rounded. And you can do it either way. So you can do it nice and controlled and kind of slow, or you can do it crazy Maniac style, out of control. Another thing, there's burnouts, there's rolling burnouts, there are crazy Larrys, and there's donuts. You can look up the differences between it. And then there's drifting. I'm kind of doing a combination of a drift slash burnout slash donut. So this is just what I'm doing to get into it. Some people say it doesn't count if your foot's down. Other people say, you know, do it either way. I'm learning it with my foot down. When I first started, I was trying it with my feet up, and I just got to the point where I felt like I was going to make a little more progress with my feet down. But the ultimate goal for legit drift is going to be feet up, and you're just controlling it all throttle. And starting out, I'm doing smaller circles. Eventually I may work my way up to doing bigger circles. I do think if you learn a rolling burnout, it's going to make it a little bit easier, because you're going to get used to that back tire spinning and kind of get the feel for the bike going around. The only reason I don't spend a ton of time with rolling burnouts is because it totally goes through that back tire fast. I will attempt to do a couple rolling burnouts. The trick with the rolling burnout, based on what Dom taught me, is you are all the way up, balls to the top or front of the bike, pressure on that front, over the bars and forks, and it's a matter of not giving it too much front brake, but not giving it too little front brake. And you basically are going to pop the clutch, get that back tire burning, and yeah, kind of feather that front brake. Not too much, not too little. My challenge when I first started is I gave it too much front brake and it didn't want to go. When you're doing those rolling burnouts, if you accidentally squeeze the front brake when you got too much momentum, that could cause that front tire to lock up, causing you to spill and crash onto the ground. All right, so we got all that stuff out of the way. A few tricks and tips to get easier way into this before you even think about doing it on a Harley. If you have the opportunity, get a dirt bike or supermoto or even a Honda Grom or a pit bike, go out in a dirt field and practice doing it that way, both ways. That way you get a feel for the back of the bike kind of losing traction and getting squirrely behind you. You get a feel for how to counter steer and all that stuff, because trust me, it's going to be a lot easier in the dirt on a lighter bike than if you just go straight to Harley on the pavement. And a lot of the dudes who totally kill it come from a dirt bike background. They have that bike control, they have the handling control. It's not like they just woke up one day to the next and jumped on the Harley to do it. Number one thing when you actually get on the bike to start doing this, oh man, I just jumped on the bike after dumping it and my throttle is stuck. Well, I'm gonna have to go home and fix that. I didn't bring tools with me. Yeah, I ain't gonna be drifting like this. So I'm gonna make my way back to the house, but I got plenty of clips, and we're gonna look at those clips and kind of talk about what's going on. So first and foremost, get comfortable on your motorcycle. You know, don't do this day one just when you brought your bike home, because like I said, you're gonna drop your bike, you're gonna dump it over, it's gonna happen. So get comfortable, get used to your motorcycle. In my opinion, the wheelies are way easier to learn and practice than the drift. You just don't, you're not risking as much initially with those wheelies. You can chase out a wheelie and stuff, you chase out a drift and it gets away from you, and yeah, you're in for a world of hurt and your bike. The first thing you could do is start out slow, going, you know, 10, 50 miles per hour, pull in your clutch and lock up the rear brake. Just lock up the rear brake, and you can do that, start to slowly go a little faster and faster, and you're just getting comfortable locking up that rear tire, getting comfortable with the feel of what it's like to lock up that rear tire. So again, clutch all the way in, first gear should be fine, lock up that rear brake, start to skid a little bit. And then you can start to let that tire kind of move side to side on you. See what it feels like with the tire getting out from under you. Nothing crazy. After getting real comfortable doing that, then you're going to start, again, going real slow, just turning to the right or the left, whichever way you're more comfortable with starting out. You'll know which way feels more comfortable to you. But just do a little skid, putting your foot down. Little skid, putting your foot down. Man, this is not easy riding with the stuck throttle, I'll tell you that much. You know, eventually, as when you're real comfortable on the bike and you know what it feels like to do a donut, like in the dirt, for example, then you might be ready to start actually trying to break it into the drift. And the key with that is you got to get your RPMs up high enough to where you're going to actually come into that skid, turn the bike a little bit, get that tire kind of on its side so you don't have as much, you know, rubber. So you don't have as much rubber on the ground, so you have less, you know, friction, less traction that you got to brake. And then the key is going to get your RPMs real high so that you break traction and that back tire starts to slide. And it's kind of like when you dump the clutch to do a wheelie. You build the RPMs up, dump the clutch, and it's going to, and you're going to feel it break loose. And the first couple times you do that, especially if you've never messed around in the dirt, it's going to freak you out. And your initial instinct is going to be to pull the clutch in and chop your throttle. Again, similar to when you're doing a wheelie. You get the front wheel up in the air and you chop your throttle and the wheel comes down. Well, you're going to have the instinct to do that on your drifts as well. The problem is, if you do that in a drift, that's going to cause that back tire to stop rotating. It's going to stick, and then it's going to throw you up over the motorcycle. And that's exactly what happened to me today when I went over both times. Pretty gnarly. So the best thing you can do is when you're starting to learn how to drift, is learn how to throttle out. What do they say? When in doubt, throttle out. In other words, you're better to give it more gas and lay the bike down on your low side. Than to chop the throttle or pull in the clutch, causing that rear tire to lock up and throw you over. You're always better off give it more gas, throttle out, and yeah, hopefully you can do that. And hopefully I got some clips of me doing that just so you can see what it looks like. Now, I don't really know what to tell you as far as like the handlebars and the counter steering when you actually go into the drift. Most of that I figured out on my DRZ, again, in the dirt. You kind of get a feel for where to lean, you know, where to do your body positioning, and how to turn your bars to kind of counter steer the motorcycle. And that's, like I said, why I would highly recommend start out in the dirt. Maybe I'll do a video how to drift your DRZ in the dirt. That's not a bad idea, actually. Because a lot of that's going to be feel. It's going to be feel. You're going to feel where the bike is. But for the most part, when I'm trying to these drifts, I'm more up towards the front of the tank, try to stay kind of over the handlebars, and then you try to be on the inside of the bike, whichever way you're drifting, if that makes sense. So you're kind of in more towards the way you're drifting. And you want to be in kind of an aggressive stance, but you also want to be relaxed. You don't want to be super rigid, and that goes with just about anything you do on the motorcycle, skateboarding, BMX, whatever it is you're doing. It never helps to be super rigid and stiff. You want to be nice and relaxed. You're always going to be better off if you're nice and relaxed. Yeah, this throttle is thrashed. So yeah, as far as body position, you're going to be on the inside of the bike. kind of up over the bars. I find that my butt kind of scoots to the back. I don't know if it's because I'm shorter or what, but it kind of scoots to the back lip of the seat. So it kind of gets you locked in there. And then you want to stay loose, man. You want to stay nice and loose. And once you get that tire to break loose and you have your RPMs built up, I don't do anything with my throttle. Or with my clutch. I try to get my hand off the clutch. I might have the one finger on the clutch, and then it's gas. And you'll notice the dudes who are good at what they do are kind of keeping those RPMs up, but you're not just wide open the entire time. You do kind of modulate the throttle a little bit. Again, very similar to a wheelie where you find the sweet spot and then you kind of keep it in that sweet spot. So you're going to go vroom, vroom, break the tire loose, and then you're going to kind of be kind of keeping those RPMs right where they need to be based on how quickly you're sliding around, if you want to slow it down, if you want to kind of come out of the drift, all that stuff. Talk about coming out of the drift, honestly, I'll get to a point where either I get greedy and I crash because I'm keeping it going too much, or I get to a point where I just say, all right, I'm ready to finish this off, let's not push our luck, and you kind of let off the gas, or you I don't even know, that's almost like just happens naturally. You kind of just, it's like coming out of a circle, you know. That's not the hard part, trust me. The hard part's going to be getting into the drift and maintaining the drift. But the big things, if I was going to tell you, the biggest thing is practice in the dirt, and then really when you dump the clutch and give it gas to get the tire spinning around, commit to it. You got to commit. Don't chop the throttle. In fact, if you could like intentionally just lay the bike on its side a couple times just to understand that's the safe way to do it, then that would be great. Because again, you're much better laying the bike down on its side than chopping the throttle or pulling in the clutch and going over.
One thing I didn't really touch on is where are you looking throughout the drift. The super good dudes who know what they're doing, they can look any which way they want. But for us newbies starting out, it's going to be important. Try to avoid looking down at the ground. I know starting out it's real awkward feeling, and you kind of want to look at your hands and at the ground, just like when you're learning to ride a motorcycle. But you always got to keep your eyes up and kind of look the way you want to be turning. So get in the habit of looking kind of into the circle, looking up ahead, kind of over your shoulder, as opposed to down at your hands and or at your foot. And that leads me into the next thing. As far as the foot goes, again, it's personal preference if you want to have your foot down or up. Ultimately, the goal should be getting your feet up on the pegs. But with your foot, if you are dragging it on the ground like the way I do it, try not to have your foot just totally dangling out there crazy. Like, try to have some control with where your foot is. You don't want to be using your foot to completely hold you up. It's just a little bit of a, almost to stabilize, not even so much to stabilize as just to kind of feel where you're going. At least that's how I look at it currently with where I'm at right now. But anyway, yeah, those 2 points, keep your eyes up, kind of look the way you're going to be going. And then second, with your foot, don't just let it hang loose crazy willy-nilly like. Try to have some control with your foot so that eventually you can bring it onto the peg and you're good to go. All right, I think I hit all the main points on this one. Again, this was very long-winded, very in-depth, but I want to actually hit the different points because these are all the questions I had when I was starting out. Front brake, no front brake, how much gas, how do I go into it, where, you know, body position, all that stuff. So hopefully I hit all those major points. Drop a comment below if you guys have any questions. I'll put links below to Brian636 and Dom829. They've got great how-to videos and they actually know what they're doing. And as I progress and get better, I'll continue to do updates as well. Like and subscribe if you dig the content. You can catch me on Instagram at John's Moto Garage. And until the next one, ride safe, have fun out there. Adios, nos vemos.
And now my next step is learning to go to the right because all I do is practice to the left, but I'll get there eventually. And that's when you do something like that.